The starship Aegis drifted silently above the violet clouds of Orevan, its sleek hull reflecting the faint light of the distant sun. Inside the command deck, Captain Elias Rourke leaned over the viewport, his brown eyes tracing the patterns of the alien world below. For years, humanity had mapped countless planets, but Orevan had always remained an enigma. It was alive with color and movement, a place where the rules of nature seemed to dance in unpredictable ways. Birds with crystalline feathers glimmered through the dense canopies, and rivers of liquid silver carved paths between jagged mountains. Yet the beauty of the planet was not the main reason Elias had come. The Zithurians were the real mystery. They were unlike any species humanity had met before, tall, slender beings with elongated limbs, shimmering skin, and eyes that reflected the sky in changing colors. But what made them truly remarkable was their society. Male Zithurians were known for their strict customs and territorial nature. The females, on the other hand, were almost sacred. They carried the collective wisdom of the race and were rarely seen in public. Scholars on Earth had speculated for decades about the roles of Zithurian females, but no human had ever approached one. Many tried, and all had failed, leaving Elias with a mixture of curiosity and determination. Elias adjusted the small communicator clipped to his uniform. The voice of his colleague, Dr. Miranda Shaw crackled through the earpiece. "Elias, are you sure about this? We've observed them for months. The males are extremely protective. One wrong step and—" "I need to see them for myself." The buildings were translucent and organic, flowing in shapes that seemed impossible to construct by human hands. Light shimmered along their surfaces, reflecting in hues of violet, blue, and green. From above, it seemed like the city was breathing. The Aegis descended slowly into a clearing near the edge of the city. Elias felt his pulse quicken as the landing gear touched the soft ground. This would be his first close encounter with Zithurians outside of observation. He checked his equipment, a translator device, a holographic projector, and a small personal shield, just in case. Not for fighting, but for protection against any accidental misunderstandings. As the hatch opened, Elias stepped onto the soft, moss-like surface. The air was thick but breathable, scented with the fragrance of unknown flowers. He took a deep breath and adjusted his posture, reminding himself that this was not a place for haste. Patience and respect would be his greatest tools. From the edge of the forest, he saw them, male Zithurians standing tall, watching him. Their eyes glimmered with shades of silver and blue, and their postures were rigid, alert. They did not approach, but their presence was undeniable, a silent warning that human boundaries would be tested. Elias moved slowly, hands visible, projecting calm and respect. "I mean no harm," he murmured, not expecting them to understand. He activated the holographic translator, which could mimic tonal patterns and gestures. A soft ripple of light formed in front of him, translating his words into a visual pattern the Zithurians might recognize. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of the males stepped forward, tilting its head. It was not an aggressive gesture, more a test of intent. Elias smiled faintly. This was his chance. He gestured toward the city and then to himself, trying to communicate curiosity and respect without crossing boundaries. Hours passed like this. Elias remained at the edge of the clearing, observing, communicating through light, gestures, and symbols. Slowly, one of the males, older than the others with a faint violet shimmer in its skin, began to relax. It moved aside slightly, revealing a glimpse of the Zithurian females within the city. They were even more striking than he had imagined. Their forms were elegant and fluid, moving as if part of the light itself. They carried no weapons, no signs of aggression, yet their presence radiated authority and wisdom. Elias' heart pounded. He had seen images, descriptions, but nothing prepared him for the reality. He knew that approaching them directly was forbidden, yet he could sense curiosity in their gestures. One female in particular paused near the doorway, tilting her head in a way that suggested she noticed him. He took a careful step forward, then stopped, waiting for any reaction. The male guard did not move. The female looked at him for a long, silent moment before turning and disappearing into the city. Elias exhaled slowly. He had made contact, even if only for a fleeting second. Over the next few days, Elias returned to the same clearing, observing and attempting communication. He learned to mimic the subtle gestures of the Zithurians, slight bows, hand positions, and the way they aligned their bodies with the light. Each attempt built a small thread of understanding. One morning, as the twin suns rose over the horizon, Elias noticed something unusual. The females had begun to appear closer to the edge of the city. They did not approach him directly, but they lingered, watching. It was as if they were testing him, measuring whether he could understand their world without violating it. Elias knew that this was a critical moment. He activated his holographic translator and projected a sequence of lights that mimicked the Zethurian patterns he had observed during their rituals. The air shimmered as the patterns danced before the females. One of them stepped forward, pausing in the clearing, eyes reflecting the light in a spectrum Elias had never seen before. He lowered himself to the ground, a gesture he had observed the Zethurians use when showing respect. The female tilted her head, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the world held its breath. Then slowly she extended a hand, not touching him but pointing toward the forest, an invitation to follow. Elias' mind raced. He had never imagined he would be allowed this close. With careful steps, he followed the gesture, stopping frequently to ensure the males were comfortable with his movement. The forest seemed to open before him, revealing pathways that twisted and glimmered with bioluminescent plants. As they moved deeper, Elias observed the harmony of the environment. Every plant, every stream seemed to have a purpose, a rhythm that resonated with the Zethurians themselves. It was a world that lived by balance, where no being dominated another, yet every action had meaning. The female led him to a small clearing, where a pool of crystalline water reflected the sky. She gestured toward the water, then back to him, as if inviting communication. Elias knelt beside the pool and projected a holographic image of himself, showing curiosity and learning. The female responded with gestures that were intricate, almost like a language made of movement. He began to mimic them, each gesture earning a subtle shimmer of approval in her eyes. Time became fluid as they communicated, learning from each other without words. Elias realized that understanding the Zethurians required patience and respect, not force or demand. In this silent exchange, he glimpsed the depth of their society, the way knowledge was shared, the importance of harmony, and the value of empathy. Back in the city, the male Zethurians observed cautiously. Some were intrigued, others wary, but none intervened. It was a delicate balance, and Elias understood that even the smallest misstep could undo the trust he was beginning to build. Days turned into weeks. Elias returned to the clearing daily, each time earning slightly more trust. The females began to approach without hesitation, moving in ways that suggested curiosity rather than fear. Elias documented everything meticulously, noting patterns, gestures, and the subtle shifts in their society. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the forest, the female, whom he had begun to think of as Liara, paused before him. She extended a hand again, and this time, Elias felt a sense of connection that went beyond mere observation. It was mutual understanding. For the first time, he realized that humans had something unique to offer the Zethurians, not strength or technology, but empathy, curiosity, and the willingness to bridge worlds without violence. It was a revelation that filled him with hope. As he returned to the Aegis that night, Elias looked back at the glowing city. He knew that the journey had only just begun. The barrier between humans and Zethurians was fragile, but it had been pierced. With patience, respect, and understanding, he might be the first human to form a genuine bond with this alien race. And somewhere deep within the city, Liara watched him leave, a spark of curiosity in her eyes that promised the future was far brighter than anyone had imagined. The stars above Orevin shimmered like mirrors, reflecting possibilities yet to be explored. Elias smiled to himself, feeling the weight of history and the thrill of discovery. Humanity had taken its first step into a world of wonder, and the story of trust, courage, and understanding had only just begun. Elias returned to Orevin the next morning with the same careful respect he had practiced before. The city glimmered beneath the twin suns, and the air carried the same fragrant scent of unknown flowers and glowing moss. Today felt different. Today he sensed an unspoken invitation from the Zethurians. He could almost feel their curiosity reaching out like threads, delicate yet persistent. He moved slowly, each step measured, aware that trust was fragile. The male Zethurians lingered at the edges of the city as he approached, their eyes glimmering with cautious approval. Elias lowered his posture in a gesture of humility and respect, keeping his hands visible. He activated his translator, letting the soft holographic patterns ripple gently in front of him. The female he had come to know as Liara appeared, emerging from the city with her usual grace. She did not speak. Words were unnecessary. Her gestures were the language here, and Elias had been learning diligently. She tilted her head slightly and gestured for him to follow. He understood immediately. This time, however, the path led deeper into the city. Buildings of crystal and light formed a labyrinth of natural and artificial design, moving as if alive. Elias kept his eyes on Liara, mimicking her gestures to show understanding. Occasionally, he paused to observe the flowing forms of the Zithurians around him, noting how each movement carried meaning. Nothing was wasted. Every gesture, every tilt of the head, every shimmer of the eyes communicated respect, curiosity, or intent. Liara led him to a courtyard filled with floating platforms of luminescent stone. Pools of liquid crystal reflected the sky above, and strange plants glowed softly at the edges. Elias marveled at the precision of it all. He realized that the city was not only a home, but also a reflection of the Zithurian mind, balanced, elegant, and full of purpose. The other females began to appear, watching him from a distance. None approached too closely, but their presence was an acknowledgement of his growing acceptance. Elias gestured again, this time projecting holographic patterns that reflected the geometric shapes he had observed in their rituals. The females responded with small, intricate gestures of their own, a silent conversation of light and motion. Hours passed like minutes. Elias realized he had entered a new phase of understanding. The Zithurians were not just curious, they were testing him. Their tests were subtle, designed to measure his patience, intelligence, and respect for their culture. Liara moved to a platform above a small reflective pool and gestured toward it, then back at Elias. He approached carefully, observing the way the water mirrored not just his reflection, but the movements of the surrounding plants. It was as if the environment itself was alive with patterns waiting to be understood. He projected a holographic sequence of symbols, simple at first, showing his curiosity and willingness to learn. Liara responded with a gesture that mirrored his pattern but added complexity, creating a subtle challenge. Elias focused, analyzing the sequence and mimicking it as closely as possible. When he succeeded, Liara's eyes shimmered with a brighter hue, a clear sign of approval. The other females, watching silently, seemed to acknowledge his progress. Elias felt a surge of hope. This was not about force or dominance. This was about connection and understanding. It was a test of intellect, empathy, and patience, a test that humans could excel at if they respected the rules. Over the next several days, Elias returned to the courtyard, learning more from the Zithurians each time. They introduced him to patterns in light, sound, and motion that formed a language of their own. He discovered that these patterns were not only communication, but also a way to share knowledge and experience. Every gesture carried a story, a memory, or a lesson. One afternoon, while Elias practiced a particularly complex sequence, Liara paused and extended her hand again, pointing toward a distant structure made of translucent crystal. The other females watched, seemingly urging him to follow. Elias felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This could be an opportunity to learn something truly remarkable, or it could test his limits in ways he could not yet imagine. He followed carefully, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The path led through corridors that twisted and shimmered, reflecting light in ways that made it hard to distinguish floor from ceiling. Elias relied on gestures and visual cues, mimicking every subtle sign from Liara to maintain trust. Finally, they reached a chamber filled with floating spheres of light, each humming softly with energy. Elias understood immediately. This was a library not of books, but of knowledge encoded in patterns of light, color, and movement. Each sphere contained a record of Zithurian history, science, art, and philosophy. Liara gestured for him to observe, and Elias stepped closer. As he focused on a sphere, images and patterns unfolded in front of him. He saw the Zithurians' development over millennia, their discoveries, challenges, and triumphs. He realized that this knowledge was sacred, and he treated it with the utmost respect. Every gesture, every careful step was meant to show he understood its value. For hours, Elias explored the patterns, asking questions through gestures. Liara responded with patient guidance, pointing out details, correcting minor misunderstandings, and encouraging deeper observation. He began to see connections between their technology and philosophy, how their inventions were guided not just by function, but by harmony with nature and society. Elias noticed that some spheres responded to his gestures, changing patterns when he applied logic or creativity. It was as if the knowledge itself was interactive, testing his intellect and perception. He smiled to himself. Humans had always been adaptable, curious, and creative. Perhaps that was why Liara had chosen to engage with him, unlike any other human before. The other females remained in the chamber, watching without intruding. Their presence was not threatening but supportive, like guardians ensuring the sacred knowledge was treated properly. Elias felt a deep respect for their discipline and organization. He realized that the Zithurians' strength lay not in weapons or aggression, but in their ability to maintain harmony and pass knowledge with care. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows through the crystal walls, Elias paused. He projected a simple pattern of gratitude, bowing slightly in acknowledgement of the lessons he had received. Liara mirrored his gesture, her eyes glowing softly. For the first time, he felt a true connection, a bridge between human curiosity and Zithurian wisdom. Over the next week, Elias continued these sessions, learning more complex patterns and concepts. He discovered that the Zithurians had developed technology that harnessed energy without harming their environment, communication methods that allowed entire communities to share thoughts, and artistic expressions that conveyed emotion and knowledge simultaneously. Elias shared what he could in return, though carefully. He showed patterns from human mathematics, music, and art, using light sequences to convey concepts that might otherwise be impossible to translate. Liara responded with fascination, absorbing each demonstration and comparing it with Zithurian methods. Slowly, a mutual exchange developed, not just of information but of perspective. One afternoon, Elias noticed a subtle change. The other females began to engage more directly, offering small gestures and tests of understanding. It was clear that his patience and respect had earned him broader acceptance. He could sense their curiosity growing. They were beginning to see humans as capable partners, not just observers. Elias felt a surge of pride, tempered with humility. He had come to learn, not conquer, and yet he realized that this human trait, curiosity tempered by respect, was exactly what allowed him to succeed where others had failed. During one session, Liara led him to a platform overlooking the city. She gestured toward the horizon, indicating the vast expanse beyond the city walls. Elias understood immediately. She was inviting him to consider the bigger picture, the possibilities that lay ahead if humans and Zithurians could work together. He projected a sequence showing interstellar maps, stars, and potential exploration paths, sharing the human perspective on exploration and curiosity. Liara's response was subtle but unmistakable, an acknowledgement of possibility and partnership. The other females observed, their gestures forming a silent chorus of approval. That night, as Elias returned to the Aegis, he reflected on the journey so far. He had learned that trust could not be forced, that understanding required patience, and that even in a world vastly different from his own, humans could find connection through empathy and curiosity. He also realized that he was not alone. Somewhere in the Crystal City, Liara and the other females were observing, learning from him just as he had learned from them. This mutual exchange, he understood, was the beginning of a new era, one where humans could contribute without dominating, where respect and curiosity could achieve what aggression never could. Elias lay in his cabin that night, staring at the faint glow of Orevin through the viewport. He thought about the future, about the partnership that could grow, and about the delicate trust he had begun to earn. For the first time, he felt that humans were not just visitors. They could be participants, contributors, and catalysts for something greater. And in the city, Liara watched the stars with the same sense of curiosity. She sensed potential in this human, something rare and valuable, the willingness to approach the unknown with respect, intelligence, and courage. She knew that if this continued, the boundaries between their worlds could be bridged, not by force, but by understanding. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that merged with the glowing pathways of the city. Elias and Liara, separated by species yet connected by trust, both sensed the same truth. Discovery was not just about exploring worlds, it was about exploring minds, hearts, and the potential for harmony. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patterns, and new lessons. But for now, the first bridge had been built. The mornings on Orevin had a soft, golden light that filtered through the crystalline city, painting every surface in hues of amber and violet. Elias stepped out of the Aegis, his boots making soft impressions on the moss-like ground. The air smelled of blooming flora and rain that had fallen over the forest in the night. Today felt different. He sensed a purpose in the rhythm of the city, a pull toward progress that went beyond mere observation. Liara appeared near the edge of the city, her movements fluid and precise. She gestured toward a new section of the city he had not yet explored, a place where the architecture was taller, more complex, and alive with shifting light. Elias recognized immediately that this was a deeper part of Zethurian society, one reserved for those they truly trusted. He moved forward cautiously, keeping every step respectful and deliberate. The male Zethurians who had previously watched from the shadows were present, but their demeanor had changed. They were no longer wary or suspicious. Instead, there was a sense of acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement that Elias was not here to disrupt, but to learn and engage. As they reached the new section, Elias noticed intricate patterns etched into the walls, glowing softly in the sunlight. Liara extended a hand toward one of these designs, and it shifted, responding to her gesture. Elias understood that this was a form of knowledge, interactive, alive, and responsive. The Zethurians had developed ways to encode wisdom and experience into forms that were both art and information. He projected a holographic pattern to mimic what he had learned, adding a human touch, a pattern from Earth mathematics that echoed the natural rhythms of the Zethurian design. Liara tilted her head in fascination, her eyes shimmering brighter. It was clear she appreciated both the effort and the creativity. Over the following days, Elias and Liara began a series of exchanges that were far more sophisticated than before. They worked together on small projects, analyzing the way energy flowed through the crystalline structures, exploring how light could be used to communicate across the city, and discovering methods for sustainable interaction with the environment. Other females began to participate, offering guidance and observing closely. Their gestures became more elaborate, forming sequences that conveyed abstract concepts. Elias learned to interpret these carefully, understanding that each movement carried multiple layers of meaning, emotional, intellectual, and practical. He realized that the Zethurians had a philosophy that integrated every aspect of life. Their technology was not separate from their art, their culture, or their environment. Everything was interconnected, and knowledge was shared not for dominance but for harmony. One afternoon, Liara led Elias to a platform overlooking a flowing river of light, a phenomenon unique to Orovin. She gestured toward the river and then back at him, a silent challenge to understand its patterns. Elias projected a sequence of light that reflected the flow, matching its rhythm. The river responded subtly, bending and refracting in new directions. Liara's eyes shimmered with approval. The other females observed silently, but their attention was focused, not on Elias alone, but on the process. They were teaching, testing, and sharing simultaneously. Elias began to understand that the true purpose of this interaction was mutual growth. Humans could learn from Zethurians, but humans could also offer fresh perspectives that Zethurians had not considered. Elias shared sequences inspired by human art, music, and exploration techniques. He demonstrated how patterns could solve problems creatively, how human intuition could complement Zethurian logic. Liara absorbed these lessons eagerly, testing them and integrating them into the Zethurian system. Over time, a bond formed that went beyond language or species. It was a connection built on respect, curiosity, and shared discovery. Elias noticed that the other females began to mirror his gestures in subtle ways, incorporating elements of his perspective into their own practices. Humanity, in this delicate dance, was becoming part of the Zethurian story. One evening, under the twin moons of Orovin, Liara led Elias to a large hall filled with floating spheres of light, each representing complex concepts of Zethurian knowledge. Here, Elias understood the potential of collaboration. He projected human ideas, engineering, biology, and environmental science into the spheres. The Zethurians responded, merging their wisdom with his ideas. The result was something new, something neither species could have created alone. It was not magic, but the harmony of intelligence, creativity, and empathy. Elias felt a profound sense of purpose. This was what humans could offer the galaxy: curiosity tempered with respect, intelligence guided by ethics, and creativity harnessed for harmony. As the weeks passed, the exchange deepened. Liara began to teach Elias more than just patterns. She shared philosophy, ways of thinking that connected science with art, logic with empathy, and individuality with community. Elias shared human values, storytelling, improvisation, and problem-solving in unpredictable situations. Together, they built bridges that had seemed impossible when he first arrived. The male Zethurians began to participate in subtle ways. They still maintained their roles as protectors and guides, but they observed Elias with growing respect. His ability to learn quickly, follow rules without hesitation, and demonstrate empathy earned him a place within the broader Zithurian community. One day, Liara gestured toward the forest beyond the city. She indicated that it was time for a new level of exploration. Elias understood that the lessons would now extend beyond the city, into the world where Zithurians and humans could collaborate directly with the environment. Together, they explored rivers that reflected light like liquid mirrors, forests where every plant seemed to hum with energy, and meadows filled with floating luminescent spores. Elias used human technology to analyze and map these areas, always careful not to disturb the delicate balance. Liara and the other females guided him, showing which areas were sacred, which were experimental, and which were communal spaces meant for sharing knowledge. In the evenings, they returned to the city, where shared learning continued. Elias introduced simple mechanical concepts that could enhance Zithurian understanding of energy flow without disrupting their ecosystem. Liara responded by integrating these concepts into the interactive spheres, creating simulations that showed new ways to manage resources and predict environmental changes. The other females began to engage more directly, offering challenges that required Elias to think critically, creatively, and ethically. Each challenge was not a test of dominance, but a test of collaboration. How well could he integrate human methods with Zithurian principles? How effectively could he share knowledge while respecting the sacredness of their culture? Elias rose to each challenge, sometimes failing and learning, sometimes succeeding and discovering new possibilities. Through every attempt, Liara was patient, guiding him with subtle gestures and encouragement. The other females observed, occasionally adding their input, creating a network of shared learning that transcended species. One evening, as the twin suns set and the crystals of the city glowed in soft violet, Liara gestured toward a distant structure, larger and more intricate than any they had visited. Elias recognized it as a communal hub, a place where Zithurians gathered to share knowledge, celebrate achievements, and teach the next generation. He realized that Liara was inviting him to witness something fundamental, the integration of humans into Zithurian society, not as intruders but as partners. It was a profound honor, and Elias approached with reverence, projecting gestures that conveyed gratitude and respect. Inside the hub, spheres of light floated in complex formations, each representing lessons, experiments, and records of history. Elias and Liara moved among them, interacting with patterns that represented not only the past but potential futures. Humans and Zithurians alike could explore these futures together, blending creativity, logic, and empathy. Elias projected sequences showing human innovation, ways of problem-solving, resource management, and artistic interpretation. Liara and the other females responded, integrating these ideas into Zithurian knowledge. Together, they discovered possibilities neither species could have imagined alone. As days turned into weeks, the partnership deepened. Elias began to understand the true potential of interspecies collaboration. Humans were not simply observers or learners. They were creators, collaborators, and catalysts. The Zithurians, with their wisdom and experience, provided guidance and structure, while humans contributed curiosity, adaptability, and new perspectives. One night, as Elias rested beneath the glowing sky of Orovin, he reflected on the journey. He had come alone, daring to approach the females when no one else would. He had faced uncertainty, learned patience, and embraced humility. In return, he had been rewarded with trust, knowledge, and the chance to participate in something extraordinary. Liara appeared beside him, her presence calm and radiant. She gestured toward the stars, then toward the city, a simple yet profound message. Together, they could explore not just worlds, but the potential of connection, understanding, and shared progress. Elias smiled. Humanity had always reached for the stars, but now he understood that reaching for hearts, minds, and trust was equally important. He felt hope that humans and Zithurians could create a future where curiosity, respect, and empathy guided exploration, rather than fear or aggression. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long reflections across the crystalline surfaces of the city. Elias and Liara remained side by side, watching the light dance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight was a celebration of progress. They had built the first bridge between worlds, not with weapons, not with force, but with trust, patience, and shared curiosity. And as they watched the stars shimmer above Orovin, Elias knew that the story of humans and Zithurians was only beginning. a story of collaboration, harmony, and discovery that would echo across the galaxy. The city glowed softly in the night, alive with energy and possibility. The females of the Zethurian race no longer seemed distant or untouchable. They had become partners, mentors, and friends, and Elias, the human who dared to approach, had become a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of what could be achieved when respect, intelligence, and empathy guided every action. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of Orevan itself, the pulse of life, knowledge, and harmony. It was a rhythm he had learned to follow, to understand, and to honor. And as the twin moons rose in the sky, Elias knew that this was the beginning of a journey that would not end with him alone. Humans, guided by curiosity and respect, would continue to explore, learn, and build bridges across the stars. Liara's presence remained beside him, a silent promise that the partnership would endure. And in that quiet, shared understanding, Elias realized the true power of humanity. Not strength, not weapons, but the ability to reach out, to learn, and to connect in ways no other species could.